You gotta love the Gospel of John. I always laugh. He's very detailed about some things, like there were exactly 153 fish in the net. And there were 7 disciples. He lists 5 of them, and then he's like, oh, and 2 other ones. It's like, okay. But he knew there was 153 fish in the net. And I always laugh at the little details. They must have been important to John, right? This story we have today is our 3rd appearance of Jesus to his disciples, if you count only the male ones. Now, if you count, his first appearance was to Mary at the tomb. And I would always want to count that. So this is his 4th appearance. But last week we read the story of the last 2 appearances. Jesus comes to the disciples who are hiding in the locked room, right? And he brings them peace. But Thomas wasn't there. So Jesus comes back a week later again. And he says to the disciples, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And he says, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." So this is their commissioning story. The most recent one. They've had many of them, but this was a commissioning story. Jesus told them not to hide away in that room, but to go out into the world. He sent them out with the Holy Spirit to bring peace and forgive sins. But what did they do? Instead, they went fishing. 7 of the 12 of them went fishing. Not for fun, if you think fishing is fun. It's not my favorite thing, but rather, they have gone back to their previous profession of fishermen. That's not exactly what Jesus told them to do, right? As most of us do when things in our lives don't go the way that we had hoped, the disciples go back to what is familiar. They saw Jesus, they got a mission from him, although it was a little vague, but they didn't know how to move forward, so they try to go backwards. And in doing so, notice that they didn't catch any fish. Fear of the unknown had paralyzed them. Joy Moore writes, quote, "Confusion set in as the disciples realize they can't go back and they don't know the way forward. The entire narrative has been an invitation to join with Jesus in God's mission." End quote. But they don't really know what that mission is. Their mission is to go into the world and love people and help people and forgive people. Maybe they didn't think that they're worthy of the mission. But then Jesus shows up again, and suddenly they catch 153 fish. They're so overjoyed that Peter even puts clothes on and then swims from the boat. Peter is our very excitable disciple. He kind of is an impulsive guy, right? Then Jesus talks to him one-on-one. And this is where we get an outline of the mission again. "Feed my sheep. Follow me." That's it. Now, Jesus was always the good shepherd. While he was alive, he'd say, "I'm the good shepherd." But now that he's not there anymore, the disciples have to become shepherds, which is something that they probably didn't really get right away. Jesus pulls Peter aside and tells him, "Peter, you are a worthy shepherd. This is your identity now, not a fisherman anymore. You're going to be a shepherd." Caroline Lewis explains that denying our identity is all too often our reality. We deny who we are because we worry that we won't meet expectations. We deny who we are because we are afraid to disappoint people. We deny who we are because we could be judged or rejected, and we deny who we are because we do not believe that we will be liked for who we truly are, or that we will be loved for who we truly are. Peter gets labeled as the great denier. But really, what does he do that we probably wouldn't do ourselves, honestly? Here, Jesus comes back to reassure Peter that he is good enough to be part of the mission. He says, "Hey, Peter," I'll paraphrase. "Hey, Peter, I believe in you. You can do it. I know who you are, and I love you. And yes, you are exactly the disciple I need. You are the disciple that God needs in the world." And this is the message to us through the story. How many times in our lives have we run back to something familiar that maybe wasn't necessarily good for us or the best thing for us, instead of trying something different that could lead to something better? I have a lot. This happens a lot in parishes and ministry. We get stuck in the familiar. The church wants to grow but is hesitant to try things. This stuff worked before. Why should we try something else? But if you never try anything new, nothing's ever going to change. The Big C church as an institution, the church, is usually behind the times on change, right? Kind of like turning a battleship around, I always say. Now, I'm not talking about trying like fad things like clown masks or whatever, because we're not doing that. But every parish and every individual person who follows Jesus must look at their own gifts and their own interests, skills, their blessings, and figure out how to do God's mission in the world with what we have, right? Like Peter, we are all equipped with what we need for ministry. Sometimes we just need that little push from Jesus, that encouragement to go out and try. So without Jesus, our efforts are fruitless or fishless, if you want to go with the story today. As followers of Jesus, we must always be asking ourselves, what am I being called to do today? And then remember the words that he speaks today. Feed my sheep. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.